It was, yeah. So I was born in Canada after the war, and what that did was kind of shape my world, because my school was full of young people from Holland and Italy and Poland, all immigrants from the war, right? Oh, wow. So it shaped, and I learned a lot. That's where the multiculturalism comes in, understanding so many people. We were all Catholic, so that was the thing that brought them there too, right? They had a Catholic church to go to. But yeah, I think that's where, and being born into a family with Irish descendants, so that meant we were on the lower end of the society. We were not British. And so many children. So we were not poor, we were working class. There was work, we always did it. I mean, my first job was when I was 9 years old. There was no money for rent, so we had to go and pick berries and get the rent money. But from that, we had money. I could go and pick berries when I was 10 years old, 11, 12, and make money for myself. My father only asked us to do it once because we were having trouble. So it's interesting, because when I travel, my skin says I'm rich, but I have a completely different other story, and it's interesting because I remember my first time in Mexico. What a strange experience in 1971 was to go to Mexico and have people treat me with such, wow, like, do you know what I mean? It was almost like I was famous because I was white and I had green eyes, and I had nobody ever treated me like that before. And I didn't understand that they were thinking I was rich. I did eventually, but that didn't do it. But I think coming out of the war years and seeing the things and hearing the stories, I mean, these kids had stories to tell us about what they survived, right? My best friend, her father was a Dutch farmer, and his job during the war was to get the diamonds out of Amsterdam. So here you have a farmer, just like in the movies, and he's got an old cart and there's hay in it and there's diamonds underneath. You know what I mean? They all had stories. Some of them were horrible stories. A girl from France told me that the Germans came into her village and literally took a baby from a woman, threw it in the air, and caught it with a... Wow. So you're in school with kids with those traumas. And at that time, there was no, let's give them therapy, no, you just moved on with life, right? A really interesting kind of childhood. Then you have all the Canadian kids that were mostly farmers. It's not the Canada most people think of, you know. We were not rich. I mean, a lot of people were not rich, but we were workers. So you had it took until 1966 to get workers' rights. Yeah, we were not always this strong democracy, and today we don't even have a democracy because of the things that are happening. If your country is still poor after 100, you still have poverty after 150 years, you have to really ask some strong questions about how strong your democracy is, or if you even have it, and I think at this point we don't. The United States doesn't. You can't have that many filthy rich people and people living on the street at the same time. And there's tens of thousands of Americans living on the street. So, but as far as, you know, going through my teens and everything, it was all black music from the States. Oh yeah, really? It was right into rhythm and blues, and we did a lot of dancing. We did a lot of stuff like that. It was beginning to be the age of where girls started to do what they wanted to do, and I certainly agreed with that. And then, but at the same time, I mean, I grew up during the Vietnam War, so when I came home from school, I watched the Vietnam War on television, live.
Live.
Shooting young people a little bit older than me.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a lot of questions. I mean, I was in New York when I was 14. I was horrified. I did not believe how many poor people I saw. And it was cold. It was really cold. And the winter hadn't come yet.
Mm.
So New York is right on the Atlantic Ocean there. And it is really cold, really strong winds. So these people, I don't know how they survived. I think there was a movie, it showed them using newspapers. Mm-hmm. Nobody at that time even gave them a blanket. You'd put newspapers over their bodies to keep warm.
Mm-hmm.
So, it wasn't very much of an impression. I remember my dad was very quiet about the United States. My mom seemed to think that they were okay. But as I grew older and I saw what was going on with the Vietnam War, that and how angry American young people were. I mean, they start shooting them. When they start shooting white, middle, upper class kids in universities, that was a real, wow, there's something really bad about that country when they're white.
Okay.
Right, they don't kill white, they only kill everybody else but them. So that made me think a lot. I know Canadians went down to be a part of that. They were murdered. So it shaped the way I wanted to think about changing the world. I think I wanted to see a world that had no poverty, a world where there was justice. I'm still waiting. But I think I'm getting closer. We're getting closer to it, I think, because of men like Trump that bring out the worst in us. I mean, I could murder him and have no trouble with it. He does. There's something so horrible about the man. But what he does show is he really is an American. That's what American is. Racist, lying,
yes,
deceiving, manipulating. Their whole business concept is not capitalism. It's something else. It's lying, stealing, cheating, anything.
Yeah.
When they think that they have competition, but they don't compete. They'll murder you just to be able to win something. And they do it. I don't know if you've heard of the Black Knights, but I think it started in the 70s, 80s. But it's when one company hires a person to get a job in another country, like a spy.
Oh, okay.
Tell all the bad things about it. And the original company wants to either buy out the other person or destroy them in one way or the other. Mm-hmm. And they were doing that. So these larger companies got bigger and bigger, and they start just taking out the little guy here and there. The small businesses and the middle-sized businesses, and they knew how to destroy them. But it was learning that. I think, going to Mexico was a huge experience for me because it was outside my culture. I loved everything about it, the music, the sun, it was just different. I was up into Oaxaca, I was into magical mushrooms, I was smoking up at that time, I was like, hippie. So it was really, really interesting to get involved in that. And then bringing back a Mexican person who eventually became my husband, right? Which was not unusual. Almost everybody who traveled around the world, Canadian at that time, either brought home a husband or... So that's when it was really the blending of races. Mm-hmm. Because you had, there were so many Mexican children that were born in Canada or Mexico that were Mexican-Canadian or Canadian-Mexican, that both countries, my daughter has a special card because she was born at that time, 1973. There's thousands of Mexican, Canadian, Mexican. And so they were given a special kind of status. Just they weren't really either or. Mm-hmm. So she kind of said but they considered both. So she can go into Mexico, she can have her card and they acknowledge it. So she can do things in Mexico at the same time. But But for me to really get involved in social activism, I think it was a life. My husband died when the children were young, 2, 3, and 7. That were the ages. And so then it was a real struggle, right, to try to be able to take care of the kids and work. And I just got to the point where it was better to take help from the government. It was actually cheaper, because if I put my children in childcare and I went to work, I couldn't make enough money to take care of them anyway. The wages were so low. So it was better to take the money and use it good, because I didn't drink. At that time, I didn't smoke up. As soon as I had children, I stopped drugs altogether, nothing. I got involved with some Pentecostals. I learned a lot about healing, but I also learned about Americans and how they take religion and abuse it, because most of that church, when they wanted special preachers, were all from the States and all wanting money. And it was the introduction to seeing missionary work that Canadians got involved with that were actually American, and it was not missionary work, it was just business as usual, humiliating and demeaning people from other countries that were more educated. That it was just another event that showed me, like you live beside a country and you have questions, and then you move on with your life, and then you have more questions. And I think by the time when I was 41, there was a special program for single mothers. I was a widow, so to go to university or college, and they gave us money to go. They paid for tuition, they paid for books, and you could even buy a pair of shoes.
Nice.
So I saved that money. I didn't get the shoes, but it was just a way of making people feel good. And that program lasted until a new government came in, and they pretty well tried to stop it altogether. And so finishing off the last year and a half doing that really was really serious, as far as there was no food. In my town, it was normal for women, single mothers, to go 2 days a week not eating. And yeah, that's the new Canada. It was normal. That's what we had to do. It was a very pro-American town too, and it was very conservative. I mean, we got information about the guy that won the election and all the illegal things he was doing. So, you know what I mean? As you go down the drain, that's what we used to call it. It was like being put in a toilet, and you couldn't grab onto anything. Right? When you're in the toilet, there's nothing. It's porcelain. You can't, there's nothing to grab onto you. You just went through to the sewer. And trying to survive that, the hatred toward women. I mean, I was told, because I was a single mother, I went to a store one day, and you could go to this Salvation Army, and they would give you this piece of paper. It was valued at $30.30.
Okay.
So you had to buy only that amount of food. So I was really proud of myself, because I'm adding up everything, and I get to pay the woman, and she's talking to another lady in front of me about a vacation in Jamaica, and they're all having... And then it came to me, and she added it all up, and as soon as I passed her the paper, she got really angry. She changed completely. She showed the paper to the woman behind me who pushed me, physically hit me. And then she said there was 25 cents, like a couple of pesos to give me, right? And she said, we can't give it to you because you may use it to drink and get drunk.
What?
It wasn't enough for a bubble gum. But that's what they were doing, right? I was so insulted because I'd never been treated like that. I was always, in school, I was the best marks. I was always number 1, number 2. You know what I mean? I was always respected. And then suddenly I'm in my own country, and these and going to university and doing the best I can to help my kids. And these two women seem to think that they have the right to do those things to me. So I think when you start to get the taste of discrimination, then you get to understand deeper. Like there's black issues, there's native issues, but there's also poverty issues. And that's what I ended up doing my thesis on, was poverty is the same kind of hatred as racial discrimination. It's the same kind of feeling. It's just like you can't get out of it, you can't get out of it. And everything that tries to stop you from doing that, right? So even getting involved later after university, there was no work. I went to South Korea to teach English, and that was interesting because they beat women in the streets there.
What? In South Korea?
Yes, when I was there in 1999 for 3 months, that's all I could do. I arrived. They let me know that the contract we signed was, they don't believe in contracts. They had my documents and my passport. So first I asked them for my documents, like, can I, just like that. I realized I was in trouble. So I did that, and then when I wanted my passport, I had to get another teacher to come with me to the office to do the translating. And then I said to the man very clearly, do you understand that that passport is not mine? It belongs to my government, and it's their passport. So if you want to deal with the Canadian government over that passport, go ahead and do it. And when in the school, all the teachers were all in one room. So he passed my desk and he threw it at me. Just, thank you. He was angry, really angry. He told me right from the beginning, they lied to me about everything. Everything about the contracts, about the place I got. The woman in my apartment building told me that the mattress I was sleeping on, she said she saw them pick it off the street and bring it up. No wonder that was scratching.
See?
Yeah. And in the end, when I left, before I left, they came to my apartment. They threatened to put me in jail. I was because I wouldn't do what they wanted. Like, if you love the children, you'll work more hours. And I said, the contract said 20 hours a week, and that's all I'll work. Has nothing to do with love. Then one day, I went to school, and one of the children came to me and said, are you a prostitute? He could speak English.
What?
And I said, no, sweetheart, I'm not. I said, I do not agree with what the school is doing. So even there, because there's so much violence against women in the country, I asked the students, what do you do? And they said, we don't know what to do. And I said, do you have radio programs? Yes. I said, you can phone a radio and start the discussion on the radio. I said, you can make a phone call to a police station. I said, what if you heard somebody being beaten? And one day, 10 people make a phone call. Another time, 20. If after 1 month the police receive 200, 300, 400, 500 phone calls over domestic violence, they're going to do something because you're bugging them, you're bothering them. Yeah. Then they start to understand, yeah, you're right. That's one way, because they can disguise their voice. Nobody has to know who they are. And everybody pretends that it's not their dad, but it is their dad.
Claro.
You know? Yeah. It was that bad. Yeah, I used to go to sleep at night, I used to do this. You could hear women screaming and stuff like that. And I had a situation with the man next to my apartment. He was in the next apartment with his wife, and he came one day. It was near Thanksgiving, and I saw a potato. There was a knock on the door and a potato outside, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. Then he gave me something else, and the last was a plant. And after the plant, he knocked on the door and he walked right in. and he sat across the table from me. And he goes, "You, me, sun, moon. You, me, and then he grabbed my breast. Went, oops! And I had my phone. "Mr. Huang, I have a gentleman in my apartment. Could you please come and tell him to get out?" So he said, "Let me talk to him." So he did. The man, after he did that, went and sat in my bed. Just the assumption. So I told him, I gave him the phone, and Mr. Huang told me, "Who do you think you are?" So he left, but as he left, he stole my shoes. And he left. And then the rest of the time I heard him beating his wife and the same thing, screaming. And some of the men were saying, "Oh, the women love it. They love to scream and be beaten and have been raped at the same time," right? Like, oh my God. So I left. I finally left. They turned off my lights. They tried to do all kinds of things. And I should have. I had the opportunity to go to another university. It was a women's university near a green area where I could do jogging and everything. I loved jogging at that time. And I didn't, because in Canada, when you leave one job, you give 2 weeks' notice.
Okay.
Over there, you don't. When I had the interview with the new president of that university, I should have moved that day to his protection. He had a beautiful apartment, just gorgeous, for all the teachers. It was completely different, completely different. I mean, I lived in an apartment where I went up the elevator with men alone. That was not really good, because I got home from school at 11 o'clock at night. School was over at 10. So you had to walk the dark streets to get home. So they weren't protecting me. And I smoked cigarettes. That was a really bad thing to do in their country. But this particular school was Christian. And one day I went to school and I had it was very, very hot. It was August, September. It was very hot there. And I had bare shoulders. And a woman came in. When you're 45 years of age there, you have a lot of authority. They can do basically anything they want. So she started yelling and screaming at me. I was a prostitute, or I could see. It was so strange because I'm from the Christian country, and we taught them Christianity, and it's coming back at me, right? So twisted, so. And what I thought was strange was some of the churches had neon signs, like strip joints. Do you know what I mean? Like, who would ever put a neon sign on a church? It was so it's just not the same spirit. If it was just the cross, it'd be one thing, but it was interesting how they took the religious end of it, and then just basically judged and beat everybody that didn't fall in with what they wanted, but they were not Christian anyway. I had to run. Like, there's an underground movement in Korea to help people who are so abused that they have to get out. Oh yeah, the teachers. I was lucky. My 2 sons went to Korea, but this is at a time when they for the first time in their history, they made a city and they planned it from day one, where all of the buildings would be. And Isla, I think was the name of it. So it was totally modern. They went there. They had an excellent time. One son stayed there for 9 years, the other for 4. So they had a really good time. That was positive for me because I had a place for my children to be, where they would be safe. Because when the economy fell down in Canada in 94, when NAFTA started, free trade, things just got worse after that. Free trade really created poverty almost immediately. Tens of thousands of people lost jobs, or you couldn't get a job. And then businesses, because they didn't know how to stay alive, they start getting rid of their older workers and then not paying pensions. So I eventually end up in Toronto, There's also some personal stuff in there. My daughter was involved with a man who was a psychopath, so he was always trying to take my life, because every time I got near my daughter, he was scared that she would leave him, right? I never asked her to. I stayed out of it. But he was really sick. Like, that's a big chunk of my life where I spent 20 years trying to help her and my grandchildren with this guy. But a psychopath has the ability to master manipulate. And he master manipulated the police, child care workers, the whole system, where he looked like an absolute angel. And I kept on, and it wasn't until a friend of mine said to me, she said, look at his teeth. Why don't you look at his teeth? He was on crack. And his teeth had holes in it. And yet, even when she went to court with him, nobody noticed his teeth. That he was the crackhead, not her. But he convinced everybody, yeah. And she eventually started taking it. That's the problem. So there's a whole history there of the government getting involved with the